this evening. Hopefully our time spent together will be beneficial. I want to start by asking how you're doing on your Bible reading. You've been keeping up with your Bible reading. I got to confess to you, I'm behind already, so I got work to do. But tonight, I plan on finishing up. I'll get caught up with us with the schedule. But I did want to say that I told you I was going to try to bring lessons that we have read during our Bible reading. So I'm trying to make good on that promise tonight. We've been studying through the book of Genesis. Part of our Bible reading started with the book of Genesis. And so I want to bring us a lesson tonight from the early chapters of the book of Genesis. So hopefully it's not too redundant. But that's what we want to do this afternoon. I say tonight, I keep this afternoon. But let me start by asking you a question. Do you remember things that people, maybe your loved ones, have said that have passed on from this life? Things that they said or used to say, and it still sort of, you can still hear them saying it, and it sort of speaks to you. My mom had an aunt that said, "It's nice to be nice when you can be nice." And so now we kind of joke, we kind of say, you know, it's nice to be nice when you can be nice. That was something that she said. She passed away several years ago. I was pretty young when she passed away. But in our family, we still remember, she's still speaking to us in a way. She said that, and we think, you know, it is nice to be nice when you can be nice. That's something that she said that we still are listening to and thinking about today. And so, in the early chapters of the book of Genesis, we read a story about Cain and Abel. You know the story very well. Right? Well, in Hebrews 11, in the great hall of fame of faith, the Hebrew writer said, Hebrews 11, verse 4, he says, "By faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts," and notice, "and by it he being dead yet speaketh." He being dead yet speaketh. That's what we want to talk about. If we go back to this slide, we want to talk this afternoon about, even though Abel has been dead for thousands of years, he being dead, he yet speaketh. He is speaking. Though he was murdered at the hand of his envious brother, and even though there's not a recorded word from his lips in the Old Testament narrative. Now think about that now. We don't have anything recorded that he actually said. But he being dead yet speaketh. And so that's what we want to talk about this afternoon, that he's speaking. All right? So what is Abel telling us? Now if he's speaking, what is he trying to tell us? Now the word, before we jump in, the word speaks or speaketh, that's present tense. That's not that he said something. He is still speaking, even today. He's got an active voice speaking to us in some sense. His influence and the lessons associated with him we can learn from today. Remember in the early chapters of Genesis 4, you have Cain, you have Abel, the sons of Adam and Eve, and they offered a sacrifice. Remember, you know the story. No, God was not pleased with one of the brother's sacrifices, right? He was pleased with the other one. He was not pleased with what Cain had done. He was pleased with what Abel had done, and Abel was jealous. He was mad. He was envious, and so he killed his brother. All right, so Abel is still speaking to us. What's he telling us? Well, the first thing I think that we're told from Abel is about what true faith is. We're told from Abel, he's telling us what true faith is. Back to our verse in Hebrews 11 and verse 4, it says, "By faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gifts, and by it he being dead yet speaketh." So what I want us to focus on is, by faith Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. By faith he did it. And we tried to make the point when we were talking to our class about it, that they both offered sacrifices. There's no doubt that Cain offered a sacrifice and Abel offered a sacrifice. Even today, around the whole world, there's people that are offering things to God. That's not the question. The question is, you know, how, on what basis are they offering it? Are they doing it according to what God has asked for, or are they doing it according to what they think is best? And the key word is, by faith Abel offered it. Remember, we pointed out that faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word of God. So we learned that faith is not just I believe in something, but faith is I hear it, I'm taking it to heart, and now I'm going to act based on what I've been told and what I've heard and what I believe. That's what true faith is. That's what Abel did. He offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice. He did what God told him to do, basically. Now, it's commonly believed in the religious community that faith is merely a willingness to accept facts regarding the Lord, and then that's it. You know, I'm just going to accept things about God, and then I'm not going to do anything else. But nothing could be further from the truth. Faith is an active, obedient kind of word, right? You've got an obedient, active kind of faith. Remember what James said in James 2, verse 18? We kind of talked about this Wednesday night. But James said, yea, a man may say, thou hast faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show thee my faith by my works. What's James saying? You can claim all day long you got faith, but if you do nothing, if you don't do anything, do you really have faith? And what James is saying, watch the things that I'm going to do. Now, he wasn't bragging and saying that he was earning his salvation. He was just saying, I believe in God so much that I'm going to work. I'm going to do some things, and I'm going to show you my faith by the things that I'm doing. And that ought to be our disposition. We got to be doing it. We got to be working. That's what faith is. It's an active kind of thing. It's not just I'm going to sit here and not do anything. Abel had an active kind of faith, and that's the first thing that we learned from him, is that true faith is active. That's what Abel's telling us. Abel's telling us what true faith is. You know, another thing I think we learned from Abel is that God is watching. This is a point, we made this several times even recently, but I think from Abel we learned that God is watching. He's always watching. The case of Abel reveals that God is observing the lives of those that he created. This is true for us. It was true for Cain. It was true for Abel. It was true for Adam and Eve and everybody that lived thereafter. Especially when we worship God, he is watching what we're doing. He knows what's going on. And we're not just supposed to live as we please, but as he pleases. You know, we brought up this verse several times in Proverbs 15 and verse 3. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. And so I hope we're not getting so redundant that it doesn't mean anything to us, but we're trying to make the point. We learn from Abel that God's watching for a positive and a negative. So if I'm doing good, God knows that. It doesn't matter if anybody else knows it or not. God knows. And he's going to reward me for that. If I'm doing evil, it doesn't matter if anybody else knows or not. Chances are somebody probably knows, but God knows. He knows if we're doing evil. He's watching. So do good because God is watching. Avoid evil because God is watching. That's something that we learned from Abel. He sees the evil and the good. In Hebrews 4, verse 13, notice it says, neither is there any creature that is not manifest in his sight, but all things are naked and open unto the eyes of him with whom we have to do. The word naked, you know, we think naked and we think, well, that just means without a stitch of clothing on. Well, naked in this sense means that it's not hidden from him. It is, God can see what's going on. There's nothing that is going to be hidden from God. You got some skeleton in your closet, maybe something that you think, oh, nobody else knows, and maybe it's something I'm embarrassed of, nobody else knows it. Well, God knows about it. And so the thing that you have to realize is, since God knows, I need to take care of it, whether it's good or bad. He knows it, and especially if it's something bad, I got to fix that problem because God knows. Notice, all things are naked and open unto him, to the eyes of him with whom we have to do. The eyes of God are in every place. You can't hide from God. God is watching. God saw that Abel offered an acceptable sacrifice. He saw that Cain did not, and he knew Cain's attitude. He was watching. God's watching. All right. What's Abel telling us? What true faith is, that God is watching. I think also Abel tells us that what true worship is. Abel tells us what true worship is. In Hebrews 11, verse 4, our verse again, so we keep going back to this verse. By faith, Abel offered unto God a more excellent sacrifice than Cain. You know, worship, the word worship is sort of the idea of offering sacrifice and praise. You know, I mean, when we think about offerings and sacrifices, we think about, you know, taking an animal, killing it, putting it on an altar. That's sort of a sacrifice. And we think what we're doing is not really a sacrifice. And we're coming here, we're singing, and we're not really sacrificing anything. But the word worship really entails that. We're making an offering of praise to God. And so Abel offered to God an excellent sacrifice. Again, we mentioned by faith. But worship involves more than just sincerity alone. And I think that's what we learn from the story of Cain and Abel. Now what I mean by that is, Cain offered a sacrifice to God. Abel offered a sacrifice to God. You know, we can talk about what Cain's motives were. There's nothing that really jumps out at you that thinks that Cain just didn't care and he was just going through the motions. I think Cain might have been sincere. I think today there are many people that are sincere, but I think we can be sincerely wrong. And so we got to be careful about that. Sincerity is important. We got to be sincere. So don't misunderstand me. If we're here and we're not sincere, we're wasting our time. We got to be sincere. But we got to make sure we're doing the right things as well. Remember John 4, verse 24? Here's a scenario where it says God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. There's two components to worship, to pleasing worship to God. Worship in spirit, well, that's good. And worship in truth, though, that's the other part that's necessary. So what I would just say to us is that I think sometimes we're accused of not worshiping in spirit like we ought to. You know, there's some religious groups that really get, you know, they're really, it's over emotional. Well, that's not what we're trying to do here. We're worshiping in truth, but there is going to be some emotion involved with what we're doing. We're worshiping God. That's not all that it is. And so if we have no emotion, then we're wrong. We got to fix that. But we can't swing to the far other end of the spectrum and be all about emotion. It's two parts there, spirit and in truth. And so we got to make sure we're here to worship. That's what we're doing. Spirit and in truth. 1 John 3, verse 11 and 12. Notice here that it says, "For this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another, not as Cain, who was of that wicked one, and slew his brother. And wherefore slew he him? Because his own works were evil, and his brother's righteous." So, again, our point here, we're talking about true worship. And so there's a lot that's said in this verse right here. The first one is talking about love. And then it says that Cain, he slew his brother. Why did he do it? Because his works were evil. He was doing wrong. He was doing evil. His brothers were righteous. And so he didn't love his brother like he ought to. His proper response would have been to realize, hey, I've done wrong. My brother did right. That's a good example for me. I love him. I'm not going to kill him. I'm going to try to line myself up with what he's doing. Try to line myself up with God. But, again, he was doing evil. And so he killed his brother. All right. What's Abel telling us? Well, what true faith is. He's telling us that God is watching. He's telling us about what true worship is. And that last verse we read actually leads us into our next point, which is obedience condemns disobedience. Have you thought about that? So what I mean by that is, Cain offered a sacrifice, Abel offered a sacrifice. Abel's sacrifice was pleasing to God, Cain's was not. By the mere fact of Abel offering a pleasing sacrifice to God, he sort of condemned Cain. He pointed out the error that Cain had. And so obedience condemns disobedience. Notice in Hebrews 11, verse 7. Now, we based our lesson on Hebrews 11:4. Just a few verses down, talking about Noah. It says, "By faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is by faith." Do you see that Noah's righteousness condemned the world? Obedience condemned disobedience? Now, Noah was a preacher of righteousness. He wanted everybody to get on the ark with him. Unfortunately, he preached for a long time and was only able to get his immediate family on the ark. But his obedience condemned disobedience. So it's like light and dark. It's the contrast. Obedience sets itself apart from disobedience. And so when the light totally sets itself apart from the darkness really stands out. You see really truly how wicked it is. And so in a matter of speaking, when we are obedient, we're separating ourselves from the world, and we're separating ourselves and making ourselves stand out from the world. And so we're showing where we stand. I just thought that was an interesting point here in Hebrews 11, that Noah condemned the world because of the good things that he was doing. Notice there in Genesis 4, verses 5 and 6, it says, "But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen?" Because of Abel's good works, it sort of made Cain stand out to show that his evil deeds were wrong. He learned that God accepted Abel's offering, and that, of course, caused him to be mad. His anger caused him to then murder his brother. That's what James tells us. Remember in James 1? James talked about temptation, right? And so he says a few things about we're tempted when we're drawn away of our own lust and enticed. And then he said that in verse 14. In verse 15 he says, "Then when lust hath conceived, it bringeth forth sin, and sin when it is finished bringeth forth death." you sort of see the progression. Cain got jealous because his offering wasn't accepted. And then instead of having a loving attitude about it, he was angry with his brother. And so then, when that conceived, it brought forth sin, and the sin was murder. He killed his brother. That was the sin that was brought forth because of his disobedience and because of Abel's obedience. You see that? Obedience condemns disobedience. I thought that was an interesting thing that Abel was telling us. You know, another thing that Abel was telling us is that influence lives on for good or bad. Influence lives on for good or bad. Think about that now. Your influence will live on for good or bad. People that, if you think about in the immediate past here, or maybe even further back in history, people that were evil and their influences lived on, who are you going to think about? Well, you may think of maybe Adolf Hitler. Think about him. Now, he's not remembered for good things. It's evil things he's remembered for. But his influence, that lives on. Think about, man, this guy, a person may rise to power today, and they say, this guy's just like Hitler. The influence is living on, but not for good, for bad, actually. Our influence will live on as well. And I think we learned from Abel that exactly. Our influence will live on. In Mark 14, verses 3 through 9, this is kind of a passage that I just pulled out just because I was thinking about influence living on. Not really pertaining to Abel, but it says, and being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious. And she brake the box and poured it on his head. And there were some that had indignation within themselves and said, why was this waste of the ointment made? And you remember, I skipped a few verses. Remember, they said, we could have took that ointment and sold it and gave it to the poor. Remember, Jesus said, the poor you have with you always. But she's doing a good work. And then he says, verily I say unto you, wheresoever this gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world, this also that she hath done shall be spoken of a memorial of her. The good work that she done is going to live on. What Jesus was saying was, this is going to live on. This is going to be a good thing that's going to be, she's going to be remembered by. Her influence is going to live on. And it's going to live on for good. And here we are today, a couple thousand years later, and we're talking about the good that she did. Her influence is living on. In Hebrews 12 and verse 1, now before I read this verse, I guess I need to say, you know, Hebrews 11 is the Hall of Fame of faith, right? By faith, this person did this thing. By faith, this person did this thing. And the chapter breaks, those are man-made. God did put chapter breaks in there. Man put those in there to kind of be able to, you know, find verses easily, like Hebrews 12 verse 1. But we end Hebrews chapter 11, the very first verse of Hebrews 12 verse 1, it says, wherefore seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. So the cloud of witnesses, who are the cloud of witnesses? Well, I think that's all the people mentioned in Hebrews 11. All those great Hall of Fame of faith people. You think Noah, we just read about Abel, all the things that they did that were good. And the Hebrew writer says, seeing that we're compassed about with all of those witnesses, let us run with patience the race that's set before us. I would submit to you those witnesses were there when the Hebrew writer was writing his book. I would submit to you that those witnesses are still today. They're still here for us. Their influence is living on for good. We read about Abel, we read about Noah, and the same thing is pertinent to us today. We're compassed about with a great cloud of witnesses. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to lay aside every weight and the sin which does so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race set before us. We've got a great cloud of witnesses. Their influence lives on. You know, another example is that of Jeroboam. So we talked about a couple good examples living on. You know, a bad example of influence living on is Jeroboam. Jeroboam was wicked, and he caused Israel to sin. But what ended up happening was those that followed after him, they followed after his evil pattern. And over in the Old Testament, it says, because of the sins of Jeroboam. Notice here in 1 Kings 16, verse 25 and 26, it says, but Omri, so he's another king on down the line, he wrought evil in the eyes of the Lord and did worse than all that were before him. Notice, for he walked in all the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and in his sin wherewith he made Israel to sin, to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger with their vanities. This guy, he walked in the ways of Jeroboam, and then another king would come up. He walked in the ways of Jeroboam. Jeroboam's influence lived on for evil. his influence lived on, though. And every time another king would arise and do evil, they'd say, he walked in the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. What a terrible influence he had that lived on. So what's Abel tell us? Our influence lives on for good or bad. I think that's something we really need to think about. There's probably a whole lot more that can be said about that. You know your influence is living on, right? You heard about your sphere. That's a hard word to say. Your sphere of influence. I read a article that said that each one of us knows and has contact with like 10,000 people on average. And I couldn't sit down and write down half the people that I know right now off the top of my head. But think about that. People that you've worked with, your neighbors, people you see at the grocery store, family, friends. Think about how many people you influence. Is your influence going to be for good or is it going to be for bad? Are they going to remember you and say, oh, that person was high character, you could always count on to do the right thing, or would they say, that was a pretty rough person there, unfortunately? Your influence is going to live on. A whole lot more could be said about that. The last thing that I want to talk about this afternoon that Abel is telling us is that there's life after death. Abel is telling us that there's life after death. Remember Genesis 4:10? So this is God talking to Cain. He said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. So now Abel was speaking to God. The voice of his blood was crying to God from the ground. That just gives me with the impression that Abel didn't just disintegrate and he's gone forever. He's dead. But the voice of his blood is crying to God. There's something, he's still somewhere. He's not physically here. But there is life after death. In Hebrews 11, verses 13 to 16, so again, that Hall of Fame of Faith, Hebrew writer said, these all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country, but now they desire a better country, that is, a heavenly. Wherefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he hath prepared for them a city. Again, we talked about this in class this morning. These people died in faith. They were looking for a city, but they were looking for a heavenly city. They were looking for a place whose builder and maker is God. That's what they were doing. They were going to live on. They didn't receive all the promises. They died in faith, not having received the promises. But it said they saw them afar off. They knew the promises were coming true. They just didn't know exactly how, and they couldn't see it physically. But they were desiring a better country, a heavenly country. There's life after death. That's what Abel is telling us. All right. So just a few short, simple points. I mean, nothing earth-shattering and groundbreaking here, but Abel's telling us some things. Abel's telling us some things. Remember, we started by saying you have loved ones that you remember that have passed on that used to say things. I'm sure you do. I'm sure all of us do. I can remember them saying this or that, and it really means something to me. What they taught me was really important to me. I can still hear their voice saying it almost, and their influence is still living on through me. Abel is talking to us. So the question is, are we listening? Abel's still speaking. Are we listening? Are we listening to the things that he has to say? Are we listening to his talking to us about what true faith is, about the fact that God's watching, about what true worship is? Are we listening to him about the fact that obedience condemns disobedience, and especially are we listening to him about the fact that our influence is going to live on and that there's life after death? Your influence is going to live on, and there's going to be life after death. Are you prepared? Are you prepared to live in eternity with God in heaven? Are you prepared, unprepared, I guess I should say, to not be with God and to be in hell? These are the questions we gotta be ready to ask ourselves. Abel's talking to us. Are you listening? Hopefully you got something out of the lesson. We're going to continue to try to, as we're doing the reading, we'll try to bring lessons from the reading each week. I'll try to. All right. Abel's speaking. Are you listening? Hopefully we are. Hopefully we are. Those are simple points. There's probably a lot more that you could think of to add, but those are simple things we need to talk about. Are you right with God today? That's the main question. That's the main reason why we're here. You in good standing with God? Well, if not, you need to be. And the good news is, it's not, you don't have to be a rocket scientist in order to get in good standing with God. For that, I'm thankful. The plan of salvation is pretty simple. We just got to be willing to submit to it. So have you done that? If you'd like to talk more about that, if you want to study more about it, just say a word. We'll be glad to assist you in that. If you've done that and you feel like you haven't been living up to the standard that God has set for you, let us help you get back on track. Think about those things and come forward if you have a need while we stand and sing.